Hello and welcome to another episode of Page Burners. We are working our way through the Malazan books by Ian Esselmont and Stephen Erikson. And I keep wanting to add the word sir in front of one of their names. Anyway, we are currently working our way through Deadhouse Gates. A few chapters each week. We cover approximately 100 pages in the mass market paperback. Today we're going to be discussing chapters 8, 9, and 10, which is the second half-ish of the section entitled Whirlwind. My name is Varsha. I run the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain. My friends here will go around introducing themselves and also tell us what they are most excited to discuss from the 3 chapters we read today. Steve, could you start us off?
Sure. My name is Steve. I'm from Steve Talks Books on YouTube and Page Doing the podcast. And the thing I was most excited about, Varsha crushed my dreams because I had a theory and I got shot down on the forum before we started recording. So
Varsha and Josh both crushed your dreams. I would like to share the credit for this.
I blame both of you for crushing my dreams, but yeah. So I am happy to be here. I just want to say this week I was thinking about, and not to get too far off tangent, but just want to say thank you to all of you for being such awesome people, because not a lot of people have friends like this, so we can sit and talk about a book every week. So I just want to say appreciate all of you and all the listeners that read along with us. It's pretty damn cool that we can do this. So thank you for everything that all of you do. So I will kick it off to Dan.
I'm Dan. I have a YouTube channel called Reading and Stones, where I do book reviews and movie analysis. And I'm here to talk about this book.
Wait, what? When?
I just felt excluded because I don't have a YouTube channel. So I made one up. I'm sorry.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the truth is I have nothing to my name, but I am excited to talk about books, and especially I want to talk like this time about the part with the ship in the Warren, because I just want to be sure that I understand correctly what happened, because it was a bit confusing, and I'm sure we don't know everything that happened, but I'm sure I missed some stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Reading and Stone sounds like a really cool channel name, though. You should start.
It does.
You better create that channel before someone else takes it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Carl.
I also do not have a YouTube channel. I do have a book out there. I'll let you just guess what it's called if you haven't heard before. No, I'm kidding. It's Truth of Crowns. It's a fantasy thing. I am most excited to discuss, I think, the ship as well. Everything that happens on the Salanda, I found it very intriguing and moving this time through, and I don't remember being quite so moved by it last time. But there was a lot of good stuff here, so I don't know. I'm excited to talk about all of it.
How's that for a blurb? I'm intrigued by severed heads. The Truth of Crowns, everyone go read it, and also go check out 10 Questions for Carl D. Albert. I believe that is this week on the blog. So go check it out.
Nice.
Is it up already? I guess it will
No,
go up
it will be when
this
is on. Okay. So
nice. Yeah, those are fun. And if you have questions for the people here, or for the people who volunteer to interview, which Carl was one of the brave souls who did, come check out the Page Doing forum. Sorry, that leaves you, Shannon.
My name's Shannon, and I also don't have a YouTube channel, but I am most interested in talking about Chapter 10, the battle at the crossing, and just there's a lot in that I really want to talk about.
Nice. I like the consolidation, because I also wanted to mostly talk about Chapter 10 from the perspective of like how Dwecker is an excellent person to follow the battles through. I think there's a lot of emotional depth there, and I don't enjoy action scenes. I've talked about that on and on in every discussion group that I've been in. But this one, apparently, I enjoyed enough to think that it is to come away from it feeling like it's one of the best things I have read. So I like to sort of hash out why that is. But because I have the mic, I also want to talk about Tremolor. I want to discuss the details of it, some of which is confusing to me, that I want to sort of hash out, get to the nitty-gritties of. Cool. Are we ready to start? Should we just go chapter-wise? Which
Why not?
Sure.
do we start with Bust and...
No, we start with learning about Coltain's campaign and Duiker,
Was that fair? Okay.
and how he has managed to outwit and outmaneuver the whirlwind so far. Surprising everyone. I think that's how it opens. Coltain surprised them all or something like that.
Yeah. He keeps thinking that they'll die now, now we're done, now we can no longer survive. and he sees signs everywhere, like Duiker, I mean, of the Cape Moths gathering around, blotting out the night sky, gathering so densely. And if we know from earlier chapters that he saw these as harbingers of doom. And that keeps happening, like he keeps seeing these signs everywhere. But also, I think there's a certain element of him looking, like, finding the signs based on his mood or like what he's anticipating. Because at some point, I think when he manages to reach the army, like Coltain's group in chapter 10, there is a moment where he notices the sunset and it's got some like bright colors, but it's also got a tinge of orange, so that could very well be read as blood, the blood imagery that we've been seeing so far. But it had a tiny element of joy to it, so I like Duiker is a very good way to read the mood, I think, of what's happening. Yeah, sorry, but I noticed the line about Cape Moths here, so I went on that tangent. But was there anything else about that?
It is kind of funny how he keeps thinking, oh, this is Vent, oh, Coltrane didn't think about that, oh, we're gonna die. Like, after the 5th time, I thought it's kind of like, well, you should know that he has a plan, and this is what's happening, right? If this is it's not like everyone is gonna die now or something, but it's kind of funny at some point when it's like, oh no, we're gonna die, no, we need to cross the river, just jump in the river now. And I'm gonna suicide with a charge, but obviously it doesn't happen. But yeah, maybe he knows at this point that there is some sort of plan.
I like when Liz tells him, "You're as bad as Camestrello. You have no idea what you're in for and what Coltain's about to do."
Yeah. What were you saying, Steve?
No, I was just going to ask a question. Was this our introduction to the Wiccan army, or have we seen them before?
We've seen them before. Yeah.
We met them in the early chapters. We met Coltain. I don't think we fully saw how they fight. We saw one interaction between them and the Red Blades, when the Red Blades sort of come in and start threatening everyone in the city, and the Wiccans want to stop them.
We did see them training. There was a lot of like a whole part of them training with the 7th Army, right?
What, an 80s montage of them training?
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
I love the descriptions of all the different clans, and all the tattoos and face paint, and they're described as looking like demons in battle, and it's very badass.
I like the Foolish Dog clan.
Yeah.
Why are they called that? I don't know, but it's kind of funny.
And the Weasel clan. I have a stupid question, and I'm sure that the answer is no, but you know how when people die, the crows take their souls? And we know that Coltain belongs to the Crow clan. Does that mean the Weasel clan has weasels come for them, and the Foolish Dog clan?
Is that how it works?
I don't think so. But I thought it's funny. A
That would be
dog
cool.
coming for someone's soul, and it has to be a foolish dog.
Yeah. So it can't be like a husky or a shepherd dog or whatever. It needs to be, what's the stupidest dog? I don't know. A Labrador. No.
Definitely not.
Labrador.
I mean, others are
Chihuahua.
kind of stupid.
Like
yeah,
a
yeah.
like a bulldog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get some angry notes from Labrador owner.
My family's a Labrador owner, so I know not very bright.
I do feel like everyone feels like their own dog is the stupidest dog in the world.
Yeah, probably.
You
Yeah.
know, like both the best dog and also the dumbest dog you've ever met. Like I know I feel that way about our dogs. I'm constantly blown away by the stupid crap they get up to. But you know,
So what you're saying is
Didn't
any
trade
dog will.
exactly. Translation, just a dog.
Okay, moving. Do we then move to Felicin and the
I guess I have something to say about Duiker, which is like from a structure standpoint, it's a very smart choice to choose him as the point of view because he is a historian and his role is to observe things. So it makes perfect sense for him to be put in position to observe a battle and to observe all these things that happen without feeling forced, right? So it's a very good choice from Erikson. Be like, I'm gonna choose him too, because he also doesn't know exactly what's gonna happen because he's not one of the ones organizing it, right? So we are also surprised by all these things, and yeah.
And
yeah,
also,
that
I
is
think it's a
great
good.
point.
I
Go
think
ahead.
it's a good choice that they teamed him up with Corporal List as well.
Mm.
It gives him somebody to talk to, and also List is kind of excitable and energetic when
Mhm.
Duiker is fatalistic and no. So they I think they make a really good pair.
True.
Agreed.
And List has some insights into Coltain because he used to die all the time, and so he stood around and got to glean more information about his commanders than I guess most people in the army did. So yeah, I do agree that is some fantastic structuring and I think I really appreciate Duiker as a character. What we see in chapters 8 and 9, how
Mm.
he doggedly pursues Coltain's group and eventually gets there. You can't help but root for him, and then he's so tired, and they wake him up in 2 hours, and then again within 2 hours. but, um, but yeah, I think it helps also that there was enough between now and the battle for us to get attached to him. Like he's looking out for Heberic, and we find out that they weren't friends. Heberic had clashes with him formerly, but somehow he respects the man enough to think that he needs to get him out of there. And then I guess this sort of dogged pursuit, which we are rooting for him, and I guess just the insight into his thoughts and the little monologues, like he's so deep and wise. I could get behind pretty much everything he's saying. So yeah, I really grew to love this character, and then to see the battle through his eyes, I think added a lot to that chapter.
I particularly fell in love with Corporal List here. I mean I already I love that he's the guy who always dies in the like fake battles, but oh my god, like he's just like it's just one of those tropes that just always works on me of the young, naive, more optimistic soldier amidst all the grizzled vets who, are much more cynical about the world because, they've seen what war is like and he's just so charming. He is a great duo, like Shannon said, with Duiker. They play off each other really well. He also, I think you mentioned this, Varsha, like the fact that it's the little moments with him, like the fact that he listens in on all the commanders' conversations so that he can learn from them. He's not granted like particularly special access or anything, but he just makes it a point to learn. And that is one of those, I think, very charismatic, likable traits. Someone who really is an underdog, but like goes out of their way to improve and to learn. And oh man, I just love him. Also, did you guys catch that we were introduced to coffee in
To
these
who?
chapters.
Oh, that
Coffee.
strange drink that the Wiccans made?
Yeah, it's coffee.
Okay.
Oh,
Interesting.
really?
Okay.
It's totally coffee. Yeah.
I did not
That
Yeah,
makes
it's like
sense.
it's
catch
very
that.
dark, it's bitter. It's associated with the Wiccans who, are effectively like inspired by the Plains tribes of North America, and coffee, is an American plant originally, and so I think that's kind of how all that comes together. Are you fact
Interesting.
checking me on that, Dan?
Yes, I don't remember. I'm sure you're right, but
I could be wrong, but I think I'm right.
yeah, I just didn't. I don't know, because in my mind I associated with Arabia and stuff like that. But
Right, no, yeah, it clearly like spread a lot, but I think it started in the quote unquote New World, but I may be wrong.
no, Horn of Africa. Maybe you're thinking of chocolate.
Maybe I'm thinking of chocolate. Oh, I am thinking of
I
chocolate.
do also sometimes.
No, you're right. I'm thinking of chocolate. Okay, well, definitely don't quote me on that then. Or
But
you can, say it very confidently, which is like with your full chest.
I'm
unless you
sorry
have
for
Dan next
fact
to you with a
checking.
keyboard.
No, I'm glad actually. I'd much rather someone do it now as opposed to me finding out later that I have made an ass of myself in a public
Oh.
forum.
How
So
many
that
times I learn about something, it's like, oh, how many times did I tell it to people with 100% confidence before?
I
Many
hate that.
times.
That gives me so much anxiety. I'm
Yeah.
always So no, thank you, Dan, for correcting me. Okay, well, so the association isn't what I was saying it was, but I'm still pretty sure that's coffee. The way it's described,
Yeah.
it reads like coffee, and it doesn't get named because I assume Steven Erikson thought it would be it would throw the reader out of the story, but that's speculation.
Hmm. It's interesting. I always add milk to my coffee so I don't associate it with bitterness, but that's but that totally makes sense. I was just
Fair
thinking of
enough.
some weird herbal thing that I would never like to drink. And coffee I can get
Okay.
behind.
I guess that's why they only need to sleep like 2 hours or something.
That's true.
And it's the first time
and
drinking it, so it's particularly effective, right?
yeah,
I will admit, while I was reading it, I'm like, I don't know how these people keep going. Like, I don't know how they physically have the stamina to keep going when they're harried by the revolutionaries every day.
Yeah.
Or almost every day. It's crazy to me. But they do. They grit their teeth and move on.
I'm trying to think, is there a historical equivalent of this that ever happened? I'm trying to think about it, but I can't think of anything right now.
I seem to recall that it is based on a historical event.
The only thing I could think of is like maybe like the Long March, like the communists in China, maybe, or the what's it called? Like the Xenophont, the Greek army retreating from Persia back to their homeland. But and
How long
the
was that?
historian wrote a whole book about it. Maybe that's why I'm associating with that.
Because like one of the things that's particularly striking is how long this march is. Like they've already been at it for 3 months, and they're supposed to be at it for another 3 months. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe.
it's 3 months for Kalam, right? And this is Coltain with a whole army of refugees that will probably only keep growing.
Yeah. Maybe I
Yeah.
think of that. Maybe I think of Xenophon's 10,000 March. Because they
What?
were in Persia and they got, they were like mercenaries. And then I think they lost or something. So they had to walk all the way back from Iran or Iraq to Greece without any allies or through enemy territory and stuff like that. So it's not really, maybe that's what it's
Well, I just
referring
looked
to.
up something. It says Erikson based the chain of dogs on historical events such as the 1842 British retreat from Afghanistan
Oh.
and the 1877 flight of the Nez Perce. I don't know what that is, but
And the reference quoted there
that
is
makes, or no, he's well, anyway. Yeah. Mm.
The reference quoted there is an interview on your channel, Steve, with Steven Erikson
Oh,
on the wiki.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I got to look those battles up. Yeah, because I seem to recall him mentioning that there were battles in history that this was based on, but I couldn't remember which. I think it's because I saw that interview.
Add it to the list so when we have him on, we can ask him.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
Fingers
I don't
crossed.
know. Fingers crossed. I guess I'll start a document or something. We'll start tracking this stuff, or a thing on the forum. Anyway, yeah, where were we? Duiker
Felicin?
and list.
Duiker.
Felicin.
Yeah.
Are we ready to talk about Felicin?
What? Okay. Go ahead, Shannon. Go ahead and start us off.
Oh no, I don't have anything good to say about Felicin over here. So, Carl, do you have anything nice to say?
She's less unpleasant than she was in the previous chapters. She
I don't know. I found her pretty awful with truth. I mean, the way she goes to the Marines and she's like, "I'm gonna get them on my side," and then immediately tries to like seduce them, and they don't fall for it. And then she's awful to truth. I was like, "Come on,
yeah, no,
leave the poor
definitely
kid alone."
right. That sucks. But to me, that isn't as bad as when she was gonna like, or at least said she was gonna leave Habork to die or eat him. Like that to me is like maybe the absolute low. It's just that's one of those parts that's just like really hard to read. Like reading that Habork and Bowden were gonna just leave her. You know, it's one of those that was just like, oh man, that's cruel. Just needlessly cruel.
The biggest thing from this section that jumped out to me, because I don't think I noticed this the first time I read this, was they're on the beach, they're being terrible to each other. And then there's this paragraph where Hood comes striding out of the waves, the Reaper of Carved Out Souls. He's waited long enough, his amusement at their suffering losing its flavor. Time had come for the gates. And then that's when our saviors arrived to save them off the beach. And I was like, wow, Hood actually had a role in this. Like, I didn't realize that. I mean, I guess we should know that because of how it began with that whole priest of Hood at the very in the prologue chapter and everything, but yeah, he's very much taking an active role in what's going on here.
I thought that was more metaphorical, like Felicin becoming ready to die. Did the actual god walk out of the waves, or like did she see an apparition?
Well, it says his amusement at their suffering losing its flavor. I mean,
yeah. Sometimes I have a hard time figuring out if this really happening or is this.
Yeah.
Well, then it says time had come for the gates, and I'm assuming that's going to be the warren that they get sucked into shortly after this.
Yeah.
So there's the Hood's gate, which is the gate to the afterlife. But I don't know. I'd have to reread that for my.
I don't remember.
I think
maybe.
I think with her not being able to control her emotions, she seemed to question whether or not there was some other influence on her. The part that I disliked that seemed really out of place was when she seduced Baldwin.
Oh God,
that was really weird.
I forgot that was in these chapters. Yeah, no, that whole scene sucks. Yeah, I mean I don't mean it's like badly written. It's just like it's painful to read.
Yeah,
it is weird.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I get it because she's learned that that's her way to survive. That's her way to kind of get over on people. That's her weapon, I guess. So on one hand, I understand like why she does it. At the same time, it's really weird. Like it felt weird. It was hard to read.
Yeah.
I mean, well,
why would Baldwin do it though? That's the other part. It's
that's the thing that I have.
Well, I remember I I used to really not like Bowden for this, but in my new role now as a Bowden apologist, I was thinking about it. I was like, well, he knew the knife was missing. He knew she was gonna try to kill him, and in a way, this was kind of the
Forcing
quickest way to prompt her to do it, and he was right there. You didn't have to wait for her to come for him in the middle of the night.
Right.
Like he just
You could have just gone and took it, just opened her bag and took it, but it felt a bit felt very mean from her. I mean, from him, but I guess he is
well,
a
and then
fairly
also he
mean
took her
person.
face. Yeah, well, and then also he's kind of mean, and he was throwing in her face. He's like, I was
Yeah.
proving that you are still who you are.
Yeah, and I guess he's an asshole. I don't know who's
He is.
better at that point, but yeah, I don't know.
And I mean,
It just feels at this
he
point
did
that
it.
it's kind of like, I don't know. Felicin is so annoying, but is she even really, like, would someone behave this way in real life at this point? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Yes.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Felicin or Bowden?
Felicin.
Yeah, Felicin, absolutely.
I don't know.
Have you not known some like really unpleasant people who, particularly you think they're like kids who were like deeply
Yeah.
disturbed and traumatized?
But I feel like after you've been together with some people for a couple of weeks or something, like, and you're forced to be together with them, like, you have
Well,
to get along somewhat.
I don't know. Like I feel like there are a lot of teenagers who are really mean to their parents, just as a way to lash out, and these are the two adults around her, and
Mhm.
and honestly, like I would not like to make excuses for Bowden because at this point, sure, she seduced him, but the state she is in and what she has been through, it is like taking advantage of a drunk person. Like, sure, she's asking for it and whatever, but she's a child. She's been through a ton, and these two have given her nothing but judgment for it. Sure, they care for her and whatnot. Like, I'm not sure about Borden, honestly, but Heberick apparently does. Like, he does because he throws himself over her to protect her when like the lightning strikes and when stones fall and whatnot. But he still has a very parental judgment for her, which comes from a place of affection, but something she can't handle. So she keeps lashing out at them, and again, like, not asking for excuses so much as understanding for her, but Borden allowing himself to be seduced by her for whatever reason. I feel like that's absolutely taking advantage of a bad situation.
Well, I will say I think I struggle to understand why he did it the other two other times I read this book. But I think I understand it this time, which is it's like what Shannon said, which is he's just trying to make this confrontation happen. Because he knows she has the knife and he knows she's going to come for him. And so it's like forcing that. Now, he didn't need to follow through on sleeping with her to do that. But I mean, again, like Shannon said, he was kind of making a point about her. It's a horrible way of doing that, but I mean, it is certainly effective at getting a point across. I mean, I'm of the opinion, like, if this was like a Reddit, am I the asshole thread, like, everyone's the asshole here, you know?
Yes.
Like, they all suck. I mean, Heboric gets a pass. Heboric hasn't really done anything bad in these chapters, but Bowden and Felicin are both just terrible. And I do love, however, particularly the way that Bowden kind of forces Felicin to reckon with herself. Like, I particularly enjoy the scene on the ship where he's like, do you ever stop and think that like the things you do are stopping you from becoming, something else, or like I forget exactly what he phrases it, but it's great. And she's like, basically it's like, are you intentionally, preventing yourself from actually like reckoning with who you are and growing as a person? And she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he's like, yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I love the way that kind of plays into her character. I mean, I think as a writer, you always want to give your main characters foils that reveal things about themselves and challenge them and force them, if not to grow, then at least to confront aspects of themselves that they are loath to do. In many ways, these characters, while they do have their own role in the plot, I do think are in some ways servicing Felicin's story, because it is her POV we're like seeing it through. And Bowden does that very effectively. And it is an interesting triumvirate because they are so different, all of them, and the way they play off each other is so awful sometimes, but also, you have heartwarming moments like when Heborek throws himself on top of Felicin during the sorceress conflagration, which is a great word, by the way, that Stephen Erikson uses all the time, and I have now adopted. So thank you, Stephen Erikson.
I think Bowden does in his way care about Felicin because he's in his own asshole way, like trying to shock her out of it. Like he's, he didn't just murder her in the desert and leave her, because that would have been the easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Instead, he keeps trying to, like I said, I just don't think he knows how. Like he, so he's just like an asshole dad, just kind of like just being awful to her and trying to point out how awful she is, not realizing that's not really going to work. That just makes her more defensive. And so
but to me it feels more like, I don't know, like an asshole dad that beats his children because he thinks that's the way of teaching them discipline. You know what I mean?
This is definitely emotional abuse. I mean, yeah. Like I said, I'm not saying it's good, but it's what he thinks is good. But that's what makes him kind of interesting. He's not just a bad guy. He's maybe a bad guy trying to be a good guy and failing at it.
Yeah. I guess did we discover in this chapter that he's a claw, or at least used to be a claw, or did we already know that?
Well, he had a talon in his bag. We don't know what that means yet. We just know that he was carrying a talon around. So maybe he's a claw.
Says something, right? Along those lines, I think she says.
Felicin says something, and Heborek is there, and he recognizes it means something specific, but they don't tell us yet what it means.
Yeah.
The wheels are spinning in Steve's head.
Yeah.
New theories, Steve.
No, not about that, but I do think if he's trying to be a good, he's failing miserably, because he, the whole scene with him and Felicin. But Varshy said something that made me think about this whole thing differently, is that they judged her, and is her seducing him a way of almost kind of like, you judge me, but kind of, you judge me for this, but you're kind of like, I got over on you too, I guess in a horrible way to phrase it.
Yeah,
saying like, oh, you accepted, so you're just as bad as I am.
Yeah, like you judge me, but look what I kind of I do the same thing to you that you're judging me for, or something like that. So yeah, I think that was just kind of tough. That was a tough scene.
I think we certainly can see it that way. I don't know that Felicin does. I don't think she judges him for sleeping with her. That's such a neutral way of putting it. It's to her, I think, just kind of par for the course that this man would want to use her body. Like, I feel like that's just kind of accepted. It's not even with judgment from her. Or maybe deep down it is. Like, I'm sure some part of her kind of feels this hatred for a lot of, if not all, men, for the way they view her. But I don't know that she's conscious of that. I really do think she's kind of using it as her weapon, right? To find her sense of power. And I mean, and in this section, very explicitly to kill Bowden, which is so poorly thought out. It did not end well for her.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess he's not like an ordinary thug, it seems. It seems like there's something to his backstory at this point that we don't know yet. Right?
For sure.
Yeah, Heberic and he have that mysterious exchange where Heberic tells him he's done well, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, Carl, you just reminded me that the reason Felicin seduces him is to try and kill him. And the reason she tries to seduce the soldiers that they just meet is, I guess, to try and win favors because that's all she knows. But yeah, is definitely Borden, like, first allowed himself to be seduced, and the passing judgmental statement, I think I read it as a judgmental statement that you're still the same person. And I forget which of you mentioned it. Maybe he is trying to shock her out of it, but it feels again like there are so many other ways you could do that. But yeah, I think I agree with the general assessment that he's just the sort of abusive dad, I suppose, in this situation.
Yeah.
But
Like go to the recovering alcoholic and you're like, oh, do you want this beer? Do you want it?
yeah,
And he takes it like, oh yeah, I knew you were.
yeah,
I knew
yeah.
it. Okay.
That sucks. Yeah.
You
And
know?
and I don't know what access she has to the drug she was addicted to, but we haven't seen any withdrawal yet, right? And I don't know if that's a thing or if we are to interpret some of her bad behavior as following from her withdrawal. But we are in her perspective quite a lot, and she's not been suffering, at least in that regard. So maybe, yeah, I don't know. I was curious about that, but
Well, I think I think she's got to have been going through withdrawal. As far as the physical withdrawal, I mean, they've been trampling through the desert in pretty extreme situations. So I don't know if we necessarily see the normal physical withdrawal signs just because her body's already taxed.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine the strongest ones were early on when she was also recovering from the blood fly attack. So it was kind of a, worst of all worlds. And because she was feverish, right? Getting dehydrated and, it's just hell. I mean, I understand why she was awful, but it's tough. I mean, for all of them, right? Like they're in extreme conditions, and people aren't usually pleasant in extreme conditions, but at the same time, you can cooperate a lot better than they are. And I think the thing that's most striking to me about all of this dynamic is, you kind of get the sense that they call her girl, they call her lass, like they get the sense that they know she's kind of young and inexperienced and has kind of been thrown into the deep end. But with the exception of Heboric's paternal instincts to protect her, like physically protect her, I just never really get the sense that they actually view her or like approach her and her personality and her flaws as like coming from this adolescent girl, like they treat her in some ways like a grown woman who has the experience and the maturity to make better decisions, as opposed to this traumatized teenager. That's one part of the thing that's hardest for me to understand with the Bowden thing is like beyond just being like, I mean, like debatably pedophilia, but like it's a straight up like, how do you not look at her and think that is a child who's also, yes, terribly unlikable, but like still is like a child, right? And I guess she's supposed to look a little bit older than her years because of all the shit she's gone through, which makes sense. But still, like, they know how old she is. They saw her before she was fully broken down. And none of them, like, it's this sort of weird paradox where, like, they seem to be aware of it, but they don't really treat her like she is a kid who needs help.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's just hardest for me to reconcile. I don't know if it's a cultural thing for them where it's like Malazans just view girls as growing up much sooner, which, you know, has some truth to kind of history. And I mean, I think even certainly in the United States, I know young women are kind of forced to grow up faster than young men, but they're still like, I don't know. If I saw a 15-year-old, is she 15 or 16 at this point?
I think she turned 16.
Maybe.
Did she actually? I
was-
thought she
Maybe
lied
she's-
about being
maybe
16.
she's-
But
She went from 14 to 15, but
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
possibly. Yeah.
I'm not
Somewhere
sure.
in there.
my vague memory is of her being 15 and lying about being 16 to try to make a point to Boric, and him being like, "You're not 16. Like, I know you're not." But maybe, I don't know. The passage of time is a little confusing. But yeah, I mean, she's a child, you know, and that's just, I don't know, hard for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the she's a child bit is hitting me a lot harder this time. I think I read this 5 years ago, so the age gap between her and me was, well, 5 years less than it is now. So the child thing is like it's really hard to forget that she's a child. And I'm not saying everyone around her should forgive her behavior because she is acting like an absolute ass to all of them.
Right.
But I think at least as readers, we owe her some kindness and like because we are getting some insight into what she's thinking. And there's one moment where she actively stops herself from being cruel to Heberic. It's like, and I forget if that was the same moment where Borden tells her that you're going to break him at some point. But she stops herself. So it's almost like she's doing this in an almost helpless way. Like it's the first thing that comes to her and she's doing it, but she's almost looking at herself from a distance and seeing that this is not okay. But I feel like she doesn't have the wherewithal right this moment to process that and do more than just that.
Plus, how long has it been since the beginning of the book? Some months, right? But it's not been years.
No.
Right? It's only been some months.
Yeah.
But the way they treat her, it's kind of like, oh, you've been like this your whole life. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's like only been a couple of months. I can see this because this is similar in the Priest of Nothing and stuff like that. But Esmenet is like a whole life of being a prostitute, right? So I can see that there. That makes a lot more sense. Here it's just like, she did it for some months now. It's not part of her personality really at this point. It's just a thing she feels she has to do to get some sort of control of her situation. But I'm sure if she went back to her normal life, she wouldn't behave that way. You know what I mean?
Disagree. I think it has warped who she is.
Do you think so?
I think so, and I think what Bowden is trying to do, and Boric too, but maybe gentler, and neither of them are doing it well, is trying to help her understand that she doesn't have to act like this, and she feels like she has to act like this. Like my personal reading of her character is that she very quickly latched onto the idea that the only way she had agency or power, the only way to actually have any sort of control was to exploit her sexuality. And so that became entangled with her own sense of identity. That's why she, tries to seduce Bowden to assassinate him. But, I mean, it's possible that she would go back to something resembling more normal, but I could also see her being someone who like goes back to an ordinary life and becomes like a sex addict, even then, or at least tries to seduce people to get what she wants. And they're kind of trying to make her be like, look, you're doing this. Look at what you are acting like. Look at what you've become. But they're just inept. And if anything, are probably making it worse.
But doesn't it feel like they could just, sit her down and be like, oh, this is what we're trying to do. This is why you don't need to be afraid. Let's just work together, instead of not telling her anything and acting kind of like enemies, sort of, so like you don't need to behave this way because we're all trying to escape together. And what, I don't know.
Right. No, I agree with that. I'm not
Okay.
defending their actions.
Okay, I see.
I mean, as they are literally the adults, I do expect more from them, and
Yeah.
it doesn't make Felicin, what she does excusable. Like if you've met an asshole teenager, like you still think they're an asshole, even though they're a teenager. It's not going to change that. But at the same time, the way you approach them should be a little different, and you should probably take more responsibility as an adult. So I'm with you on that. I guess that's kind of my point is like they're doing a terrible job. Like I think they kind of. I think it was Shannon who said that like he thinks Bowden does care for her in his own way and is just being like the abusive dad. And I don't know if I'd go so far as to say he cares about her, but I definitely think he's trying to help her. And he is just such a broken asshole himself that all the ways he knows to try to help just make things worse.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And there was this line like from the conversation between Heberic and Culp when Culp asks Heberic to tell him about his two companions. He says, you have to compromise to stay alive in the mind, and that which one person thinks of value, another is the first to sell. Cheap. Well, that's what they are now. What they were before. He shrugged again. So, I don't know. Heberic, at least I don't get the sense that he's hurt by Felicin. That's why he's not approaching her. Like there is, at least in his conversations with her directly, there seems to be this element of judgment. But again, we're seeing a lot of this through Felicin's eyes. So maybe we're only getting to hear about the parts where he's vaguely cruel to her and not about the parts where he's actually trying to reach out to her and be more kind to her. I'd be very surprised if there weren't moments like that she wasn't ready to accept. But also, yeah, there is a certain element of judgment that I think she could do without. But it's hard not to express that either.
I don't think we can just, I'm actually softest on Heberic here because he's the most decent of the three of them. But I don't think you can let him off the leash. Like Steven Erikson hasn't shown us him actually doing a good job or really trying, beyond these brief moments of action, which I do find very meaningful. As I mentioned, like him covering her up, like I think is wonderful. And I love it. It's one of my favorite moments in these chapters. And, similarly, like in the prologue, when he covers her as they're, doing the march and, getting shit thrown at them. But, the fact that we haven't seen more of that kind of emotional reaching out, like, Felicin, this is why I'm worried about you. Like, this is sort of what's going on. Like, that makes me think it hasn't happened. That Steven Erikson doesn't want us to believe that has happened. Because if it did, I feel like it would be in the book.
That's fair. Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's possible that, given how clouded some of it was, and maybe just how angry she is at what happened to her, that she's focusing on the stuff that could hurt her more. But yeah, absolutely. Like if it's not there, I think it's quite likely that he hasn't said anything either. But again, like the fact that he was willing to throw himself on her to protect her, which, if you had asked me last week, I would have said, no, Heberic is only being judgmental, because he actually said he would have, I don't know if he actually would have left her there, but he said, I thought you were starting to be happy here with who you are. And that's just, I don't know how he could come to that conclusion, because she's being used awfully. And she's certainly not happy. She's in a drug-induced haze. But the additional protectiveness that we've seen from him in these chapters, like where he's putting himself at risk, is making me wonder if maybe we haven't seen the whole picture. But yeah, but I guess that's also adding to the complexity and nuance in this situation, that who we are hearing the story from matters a lot, and the key to all of it is, I guess, the need for not judging any of them. Alexa may be bored in a little bit, but I guess they're all doing the best they think they can do in that moment, and that's that. So from here, they all get thrown willy-nilly into this warren that has goat milk as water. What? Is that true, or were they... What?
I think it's a silty water. That's what I thought. It just had the consistency and color of milk.
Goat milk? Okay.
I don't know if it has a specific color of goat milk, but maybe.
Did somebody joke to Felicin that she would, princesses could bathe in the water? Like that?
Yeah, I thought it was like a mud bath sort of thing, but I don't know. Because then they say something like, "Oh, this warren was flooded because they find seeds and piece of grass in the water," right?
Right.
And they say it's like dirt and stuff. That's what I assumed.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The milk is probably metaphorical, but you never know.
Yeah, it's fair in this series. Yeah, it's always possible.
Maybe it's the milk of some god, just like there's blood of some other god in other warrens. I don't know.
This really does feel like a series where you could have a whole ocean of milk from a god. Like that does feel like a thing that could happen. Actually, that feels even more like a thing in Baker's universe. But anyway, I love this stuff. I love Stormy and Gessler. I feel like they really finally come into their own here on the ship. They both get some great moments. I will admit, I still have trouble telling them apart sometimes. Gessler is the higher up, right? And Stormy is a giant.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I think I do differentiate them now. I mean, my entire first read through could not do it, but now I can. Okay. I love all that stuff. And with the Talanamas showing up, it's badass. The crazy sorcerer who, Steve, do you want to pivot to talking about your unfortunately probably not correct theory?
Yes, that's what I should crush my dreams on, because I was hoping that the crazy tiny warlock was Hairlock. Because I was hoping that was him. Because he was floating around, causing havoc, being an asshole. I thought, please be him, but unfortunately, it was not to be.
There's nothing that says he can't be, Steve. So if you want him to be, he will be.
I am just going to decide that's who he is.
I think Colt Jay says it's just a prisoner that was driven insane and got out, and now he's out of control.
I think something is happening with your bike.
Yeah.
Maybe you're going through a warren or something.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like you're going through a warren right now. I don't know what happened, Shannon.
Watch out for those Tisandí heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love how creepy and interesting it is, though. Like, they found this haunted ship with a bunch of decapitated Tisandí heads, and we know the Tisandí are, badass. And then we get introduced to the notion of the Tis Edur, and that this is Carl Demerlan, the Warren of Shadow, the elder Warren of Shadow. Oh, I'm hearing an echo now. It's those Warrens.
Warren of Echoes.
Yeah, the Warrens will get you.
Oh,
He's going to different.
We were traveling through Warrens in real time on the podcast.
Hold on. I think... Okay. Well, mute Shannon while he figures out the audio, but that reminded me of an excellent joke in probably not these chapters, but a previous set of chapters. When he... When Kalp and Dwecker are trying to figure out... why are you laughing, Steve? What did you say?
Because like the third time you said, what? Like,
yeah,
like the milk and the... like, what?
Yeah. I do that to my own train of thought sometimes, but anyway.
Oh, I said that a lot when I'm reading these books. Like, what? Like, what's going on?
But Kalp and Dwicker, they are discussing whether they can take a really shitty boat to go to rescue Heberic, and they realize that they can't. And Dwicker's like, can't you do magic? What is your warren? He's like, the warren of boat repair.
It would be very convenient, Warren.
Yeah. But we find out that Kalp's warren, the warren Mianus, the warren of illusion, is actually a fragment of the Tist Edur warren, which is Kurald Emerlan. And also that Mianus is a warren of shadow. But is that the same as the one that Quickpen went into when... Oh, we lost
I think
Shannon.
it's a precursor to that one. I
see.
think.
Okay.
No, Curl
Something like
Emerlan is the precursor.
Yeah.
Hmm.
To the Warren of Shadow, right?
I think, however you say it, Mianos. I think it intentionally sounds like ominous.
Right? Yeah, I was thinking that.
I think that's how you know they're related.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's the Shadow Warren, the Shadow Realm, if you will.
Which makes sense, I guess, because shadow and light and the Tisandí and whatever the other light ones are, the Triste something, makes sense. Illusions and shadows.
I mean, it's interesting. You would think that there is a triumvirate here, right? But we haven't been introduced to a third Tist race, so we'll see.
Habaric says that there are, but he doesn't know the name, right?
Yeah, only the Tisandí are mentioned by name, apparently. In Gothos Folly.
Well, the Tist Eater.
Yeah, both of them are mentioned by name.
Oh, they're mentioned.
Yeah, he knows the Tisandí, and the Tist Eater were mentioned by name by Gothos.
And they're only mentioned there.
He knows there's a third one. Don't know anything about him.
Yeah.
But one are black, one are gray.
Gothos. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying we also get the lore that Gothos is a Jagged who wrote about everything, and also that the Jagged caused the Ice Age.
Yeah.
Because they were sick of all the other races messing around with them. Which is one of those bits of lore that I love, that, Erikson and Esselman included this magical Ice Age in the history of their world.
And later when we get that scene with Dwicker and Sormo Inath when they release the god, he talks about how the Jagged just kept making ice wherever they had things that made them unhappy. So, like, basically all the glaciers in the world are attributed to the Jagged.
Yeah. I wasn't sure. It's like these ice things that happen. Is it like something that happened in the past, or is something that's happening in the present in different warrens, not in the real world?
The ice. What do you? What they say is that the Ice Age in the quote unquote real world, the human world, was caused by the Jagged.
Oh, okay. And then the ice melted.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. I mean, I would read it the way I have read it. I mean, it's like the Ice Age,
But why was there some god in the ice in the war? It was in a warren, right? Or where was it? Did they go in the past? I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I was unsure about that too. Were they inside a warren or? Go ahead, Shan.
Yeah.
That was the part I was most confused about. Was that whole after the battle, that death of the Semp Ascendant, because it was covered in all that ice, and I don't know where all that ice came from. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know that. Yeah, I mean, it was set up like it was almost like a Jaghut defense of some sort, but like.
I think so.
What triggered it exactly? I don't know.
I don't think we know. I mean, other than that guy was an asshole, and the Jagged froze him for it, Captain America style.
But do we know where they were?
My understanding is somehow they pulled him out of his warren, because I think he had his own warren, because that's what his sorcerers were using, right, from the Revolution. And
Sormo said that.
Yeah, and he was frozen. He was a popsicle in that warren. They brought him into the human world, and then they unfroze him and let the spirits of the land devour him.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
It's really freaky, crazy shit. I had no idea what was going on the first time I read that, or the second time. This time, I was locked in. I was loving that.
But I
What
guess
was
then
what
this
was
warren is
really
full of ice, then. I guess. Okay, I
the
don't know. I
Amtos
don't know how
Phalanx
it's
is
connected.
full of ice. Yes.
Omtus
It's
Falak, yeah. And did they pull him out of there or his own warren, do you think?
Wait, yeah, did they pull him out of Amtos Falak?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that was part of the warren he was using. I don't know.
Right.
Because I
Because it
mean,
may
he
not
is a
have been his
sent god, and
personal
we know the
one, right?
Jaghut were here, and
Mm.
he's an
No,
ancient
that's a
god, I
great
should
point,
say.
right? That we have the way people are aspected, or ascendants rather, are aspected in this universe. You know, you could be the knight of death, right? You could be the knight of whatever warren, you know, whatever house. So you don't necessarily have to be the god to still be worshipped and still in some way give power. You know, it's actually like, I think, Dungeons and Dragons in that way, that you kind of have these lesser deities, these demigods, who can also become a warlock patron, for example. I hope I'm speaking to someone out there knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that the ice stuff is interesting, and I was unsure about what happened with that Sem god, but I also agree that the descriptions of how the jagged froze things reminded me of the Ice Age, like entire continents at a time. Of course, they caused the Ice Age, but yeah, and now they find a bunch of Tisandí heads that are lying there. They collect them and make them into a pyramid.
And their souls are still connected to their bodies.
Yeah.
And they're working the shit. Talk about a freaky visual.
Yeah. You know, I am really garbage at remembering details in the books that I read, even when a book is my favorite. But it's amazing to me the number of things that I seem to remember just as like images through these books. Like the image on the boat with the Tisandí heads and the headless Tisandí oarsmen, that was imprinted in my brain apparently, because I expected it there and it's there. And a lot of the crossing, the river crossing that we see in chapter 10, that also I had I remembered a lot of details of, which is very interesting to me. I think, yeah, there's something about these images that kind of stays with me. Anyway, and then a bunch of Talanamas show up and give us some wishy-washy history about um, the warren, what did we just call it? Kural de Emarlan, and the Minas one. Do you think, well, Culp was already in the boat, but I was wondering if the fact that his warren matched that of the Mad Mage somehow made it so they ended up all the way inside. And anyway, there is a rent in the warren now that one of the Talanamas volunteered to cover up, and Stormy is concerned about whether that would cause pain, and he's in tears after the conversation he has with the Talanamas that he talks to realize, because he's learned that that person is basically subjected to an eternity of pain now, which I seem to recall, like I didn't remember this about Stormy, but there was some other interaction earlier on in this book which made me think that Stormy is a really compassionate person, and I didn't notice that about him during my first read. But now, between this and the other scene that I've now forgotten, he's, yeah, he seems like a really compassionate person. That's standing out about him for me.
Oh, and since we're talking about Stormy here in this part, was I the only one that like had like just a whiplash of emotions with the Talanamas, the one that sacrificed, and I'm making air quotes for people listening, himself to seal the warrant, because it's like he goes up and you're like, oh my God, he's sacrificing himself. It's the and then you realize, or a truth, that notice he took a head, so he was actually shoving a head in there, and so it's possible that he was just condemning this poor person to an eternity of whatever, and he actually didn't sacrifice himself at all.
Yeah.
Because then he even tells Stormy, I'm going to come back
Interesting.
for my sword. And it was just
Oh,
because, I went from thinking he was like the Talanamas Jesus to, no, this guy kind of sucks.
that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I didn't catch that at all, but that makes sense now.
That's what the whole bit. I reread the ending like of that chapter multiple times because I was like trying to understand. I'm like, is that saying what I think it's saying? Because
Mm.
Felicin has no idea what the hell's going on. She's watching it all unfold and she's clueless. And yeah, this dude takes the head and uses its
And then the
soul
body dies.
to bind it. Real asshole move. I know. I found that scene so moving, and then I got to the end. I was like, wait, are you for real?
But
What
then
Yeah.
what
someone
game is this guy playing? He gives away his sword. What? This is crazy.
But was it Heberick who makes this comment about how being clanless means that they're completely useless? And that's why he volunteered himself?
Yes, that's what they thought.
Well, that's
They
what they
thought
say, but maybe he doesn't think he's useless.
right.
Yeah.
They all
No,
at first thought they were grieving him. They thought he had sacrificed himself, and then they went downstairs and realized that well, one of them, I forget which one of them it was. Truth? Oh, Truth.
Truth.
Was like he took a head with him, and they went downstairs, found the body without the head, and realized, through magic that it was missing its soul, meaning he had just used its soul to close the rent, which is crazy. I mean, what a con by that guy. I don't understand why he gave up his sword though. Like what?
Yeah,
And
why did he need to make these people think that he was sacrificing himself if that's true? But
truly,
Well,
yeah.
and he was making the other Talon think that he was sacrificing himself too. So I don't know. Like he's now off the board, and we don't know what he's doing. Like
that's true. Maybe he wanted to go rogue, and this was his way of doing that. That's interesting.
Interesting. Okay.
On a similar note of like what the hell is going on, Varsha, I think you raised this point and kind of danced by it. How did they end up in Curl Demerlan? Did the crazy sorcerer, crazy warlock, open it? Why?
Yeah,
How did that happen? Unless he's aspected to it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I had that question too, and it seems to be an Elder Warden, and it is Kural Emerlin that they end up in. So how did that warden? So I'm guessing, do you think, like me and us, there is another fragment of Kural Emerlin, and there was this whole discussion about how he's lost so much control that he's no longer controlling the magic he pulls from the warden is controlling him. And so maybe that warden either merged or expanded to become like an entry point into Kural Emerlin. Or do you think the sorcerer's madness created that rent in the warden that they've come to now close? Or was that an unrelated event?
My only comment, the only thing I feel comfortable saying in response to all your questions, Varsha, is I struggle to see, I mean, unless maybe they say this explicitly, was the mad warlock doing illusion magic? Because it kind of seemed like he was doing way more explosive stuff than the shadow magic that we have seen so far. I mean, I guess maybe there's a possibility it's like shadow can do a lot of weird shit, but I don't know. I'd always associate it with illusions.
Yeah.
My tinfoil hat theory is going to be, I'm going back to Hood did it. I think Hood, because I'm thinking, where did that mage come from? The one that escaped from the mines. I think maybe he was dead. Maybe Hood brought him back, set him loose wild, and was the one who manipulated this.
Hairlock.
And it was Hairlock brought back from the dead.
That's right. It was.
Maybe.
Tell me, prove it wasn't.
Prove it.
I honestly feel like it makes more sense if it was Hairlock, like in a weird way, because Hairlock, one, we understand why he's crazy. Two, the why he's crazy is directly why he would be able to like tear through warrens like this, because he was powered by the Warren of Chaos, right, which connects all the warrens. So that would make sense. But we were not given any reason to believe this guy was flailing out with chaos magic. Now maybe they just no one realized it, and that is what he was doing, and all of their magical knowledge, including the Talanamas, was short to identify that as the Warren of Chaos, or like him using chaos magic. I don't know, but that does seem to be a sort of, it's strange how vague that is. That, like, for all the exposition the Talanamas drop, they don't comment on that at all. Like, yeah, this guy is like blowing up with chaos energy or whatever the hell.
Yeah, and chaos would make sense as like sort of the entry point into this warren that apparently nobody has ever heard of. And there is some weight to the Hairlock theory because everybody's just guessing that it's a mage who escaped from the mine. But I think between the proximity to it and basically the question is why now, right? Like, and why here? Because of which I'm more inclined to believe the escaped mage theory, but Hairlock would be totally cool. We also
And
get some.
Varsha,
Sorry, go ahead.
you had said, you'd mentioned earlier that like Coral Emerlane being shattered. I think that's something that we could point out for a second, because we learned that here, because they go to this bit of the Warren. This is clearly not the same Shadow Warren that Shadowthorn and Cotillion are in. So it's like, what's going on here? And so somehow this Elder Warren of Shadow has been broken. It's been shattered. There's different pieces of it, and we're in a different piece now. So, and I think that's something to note for future
later. And also, to your point earlier, I think it was Carl or Dan, one of you said Borden is more than he seems. And he also seems to know everything about this damn boat that has showed up, and that it was headed to Drifter Valley and what happened at the time and who they were trading with. Tons of stuff, just spouting a bunch of imperial mumbo jumbo that apparently he knows, and people are noticing the fact that maybe and he went to prison camp when he was very young, supposedly. Although, again, people are thinking that he's too young for that. So, yeah, I guess Borden as a character is definitely interesting. There's more to him, and Felicin keeps having these, bouts of fear when she thinks about him. So, all of that, I think, is building up to make him a very mysterious character.
I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I'm going to circle back to the Hairlock theory.
Yes.
Just because, like, I mean, as we're talking about all this, we're going over like unreliable narrators and people like believing one thing but something else being true, or like people being very mysterious and it being unclear exactly how they know the things they know and all that stuff. And it, like, I do think we sort of take it for granted when we're told something that it's just like the truth, when something's exposited in the world. And I guess I specifically was thinking that, like, we, like, the characters take it for granted that this guy came from the Odotarl mines and went crazy that way. And we don't actually really have that much evidence that that's the case, other than that he's kind of around the area where the mines were. But I think that's something interesting to think about with the world building in general and the stories of the world. I mean, I imagine a lot of people listening to me say that are probably having a visceral reaction of like, what's the point of having lore if we don't know if any of it's true or not, or if it's all just bullshit? But I do think that's one of the interesting parts of Malazan, that, a lot of the stories we're told may not necessarily be true, or they may be very slanted views of it. And not that that's wholly unique to Malazan, the sort of like myth and legend is not the full story. History is written by the victor sort of shit, but I think that even goes down to, right, yeah, and I think it is done well, and it is particularly, it's just worth keeping in mind, I think, as we read this series, that what we're told may not actually be what is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just more recently learned that the maps aren't even necessarily like trustworthy, because I know that last book they came out with has two different maps for Quantali in it that were drawn. One's got like one part like huge and another part small, and the other one's different because they were drawn by two different people.
Wow.
And one of them thinks that guy. Well, I'm assuming one thinks their kingdom is more important. The other one thinks theirs. So it's like it's not even necessarily. Yeah, you can't trust in this series, and I think Erikson and Eslamont use it to really good effects. It's I think one of the reasons people talk about rereading Malazan, because like I've already spotted lots of wrong things in these book and a half, where it's like, oh, people think this about this, and no, I know eventually we're gonna learn that's not true, and it's interesting.
Interesting.
So it's hairlock. Settled.
Yeah, I was gonna say the moral of the story
Hairlock.
for me is it's hairlock.
It's hairlock.
Steve, your theory is right.
Yes, I like this theory. And also on that subject of hearing from characters, I think as readers, again, we are really close to people who wield magic, so it's easy to believe that it's everywhere in the world. But Felicin talks about how she her first encounter with Hood and now what was going on with this Warren are the only encounters she's had with magic, even though she's grown up in this world where magic is real and the gods actually do walk the world, and so on and so forth. So that was an interesting perspective as well. That magic isn't as what's the word I'm looking for? Abundant.
Ubiquitous?
Yes, ubiquitous. Thank you. Abundant is a horrible substitute, but ubiquitous as we may think.
Yeah. So I guess we see it quite a lot in these books. Like magic is happening all the time and gods are there all the time. But
Right.
I guess for normal people, not really.
Yeah. Especially the stuff that the Wiccan warlocks unleash in chapter 10. We're getting closer and closer there, but there's so much to talk about in these chapters. But and Heberic's arms, we have to talk about that. Apparently there's an orange thing and a green thing that are warring together and are in a strange sort of balance at the moment.
I wanted to mention that too, because it actually answered a question I had last week, where I was like, did Heboric actually pull Fenrir to Earth? And it looks like yes. And in fact, I'm assuming he's holding him there, because that's what Culp sees, is he sees a hand holding a tether. So my assumption is he's still holding. That's why the god can't leave the mortal plane. And then the other hand is the one I got no idea what's going on. It's green and orange and crazy.
So the hand that's not green and orange is the one that's holding the tether to possibly Fenrir. I see. And what was I? There was also something about having a warren open, and is that the same hand with the tether, or was that something else?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I also want to take a moment to say this was another thing that I said with my full chest that I was wrong about. Heboric has his tattoos still, and they're still weird.
Oh, yeah. True.
Yeah. He's apparently they've grown darker than ever, and it's all black. Still.
Right, it's the reverse of everything I said. So
Sorry,
I guess my
I didn't
big
mean
monologue earlier about like don't believe everything you read is if you hear me say it, assume it's probably not correct.
Don't believe any of us.
Yes, Varsha. It says the ghost hand reached into a warren, was clenched as if gripping a tether. A wholly different power pulsed around the right stump. So the left stump is reaching into a warren and holding a tether.
I see.
I have no clue what's going on.
And then the right stump, veins of green and odotaral red, as if two snakes writhed in mortal combat. The blunting effect arose exclusively from the green bands radiating outward in what felt like conscious will. That it was strong enough to push back the effects of the odotaral was astonishing. So, I guess the big question is, what's the green? Which I don't think we could possibly know right now.
Except that the jade hand was green, so some part of it.
Yeah, has something to do with that jade hand.
Yeah. And was that the same hand that did that amazing bit of healing on? Was it Stormy or Truth?
It was the hand. It was his hand with Fenrir. He touched. Was it Stormy? And healed Stormy. Because Culp even thought like maybe he did it on purpose, because that Stormy follows Fenrir as his god, so healing. But Heboric dissuades him and is like, no, it's just I didn't think about it.
Yeah. And they talk about how the god doesn't do anything without a price, so they're probably going to pay for this bit of healing that they got from Hiboric. So yeah, a lot of interesting things in this chapter. I think we covered the essentials. So anything that we should still talk about here?
I just love the image of Boric walking his pet boar, just holding him by the leash, trotting along the street.
And he's described as frog-like, so a frog and a boar being best friends.
Yes.
Okay.
Forever how foolish you think the dogs are, the boars are infinitely more foolish.
Foolish dog. Silly boar. Coming to take your souls.
There's just one thing I wanted to mention before we move on to chapter 10 or 9, is that there's another house of Azath.
Yes.
Yep. Tremorlore.
Oh, yeah. That's the
Tremorlore.
thing that I wanted to flesh out in more detail. Sorry, what were you going to say about that, Steve, before I get into my question?
Oh, no, I was just going to mention that they did, that is brought up, that there was another house, like we saw in Darukistan,
Yes.
that we were confused about when it did happen. So, yeah.
Yeah. I have questions about that. May I go?
Yeah, go for it.
So Iskaralpast is trying to razzle-dazzle these guys with all kinds of information that they're unsure about whether to believe or not. And so here's my main point of confusion, right? So there is a path of hands that they find in the bottom of this tower that they are in. And I thought that was the gateway to, well, the warren that is called Path of Hands. Is that the same as Tremolor, or is that a different entity? I thought in the last set of chapters, Tremolor was the name of the warren of Path of Hands. But here we hear that it is actually an Azath house.
Yeah. I thought the Path of Hands was like, I don't know, something like some signs or some. It's not like a place, I thought. I thought it was like some idea or something that all these things are following through other warrens. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure everything you just said was correct, Parsha. They did find it in the basement of there.
Yeah.
It is supposed to, Path of Hands is supposed to be the warrens. I guess it's described as like the warren of the diverse and the soul taken. And so they're all in a rush to get to it. So they think that whoever gets to it will be the god of the diverse and the soul taken. And it was called Tremorlore, but we also learned that Tremorlore is the name of an Azath house, separate.
I see.
So
the one thing I would push back on is I think what Dan was saying is right, is that the Path of Hands is the path to the warren of the divers and soul taken. I don't think it's the warren itself. I think it's like this spiritual / literal journey they go on.
Yeah.
So
it is confusing.
The Path of Hands is leading to this warren, though.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I see.
So the thing that they find in the bottom of that shadow tower is a gateway to the Path of Hands.
I thought it was the Tremorlore.
The warren.
To the warren.
Right.
Which is...
It is both Tremorlore and supposedly a gateway to the warren of the shapeshifters.
I see.
Well, what they find in the basement is the warren of the shapeshifters. Supposedly it's Tremorlore. I don't think that's identified exactly as Tremorlore, is it?
Confusing how
Tremorlore is
out
in the middle of the desert somewhere.
Right.
They seem to be a bunch of different things.
Yeah. So that's my question, actually. If it's in the bottom of the tower, where is where is this topsy-turvy man sending them off again on a journey like he sent Icarium and Mapo? Like, where are they going? If it's right there in the tower.
I don't know.
They're not supposed to know it's in the tower. They're going to Tremorlore.
But then Mapo and Icarium are in on it too. They know, so it's not just past misguiding them or whatever.
Well, they could be playing along though, like
Yeah,
because Pust is clearly directing them for a reason. So
I
it's like, well,
see.
let's see what we're doing.
So Mapo's telling them at this point to take what Pust says seriously, and what he's telling them is to go off on a hunt in the desert. Possibly, I think that's the impression I got.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, okay. I guess that was my question about why they aren't just going to the basement. But if they are two different things,
Mm-hmm.
then I guess it makes
There is
sense
two
that they
different
go
things.
out. Okay.
I see.
Gotta say, Tremorlore, love it. Like, it just is a word.
Yeah,
I could say Tremorlore all day. I just want to say Tremorlore. Tremorlore, Tremorlore,
Really?
Tremorlore.
I agree with you.
It's so fun to say.
Tremorlore. Is it a good doggy name? Tremorlore.
I don't know about that.
Too many
Why not?
syllables.
Follow your heart, Barsha.
What?
No, don't.
When I get a
I'm
dog.
gonna name my dog Dasim Ultor.
Ooh.
That's awesome,
like
actually.
that. Wait, did you already name your dog that, or will you name your dog that?
No, I'm just saying, like, that's the name I would use.
Okay. Nice.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good dog name.
I think Whiskey Jack makes for a really good dog name.
Yeah.
Would.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew a dog named Whiskey, and I don't think I ever asked the person if it was the drink or if he was a Malazan fan, because sure, there are dozens of us.
Probably the drink.
Yeah, I'm like 100% sure. Did I already talk about this? There was a Reddit post once where someone met a Malazan fan in real life, and and they were like, "Has anyone else had that happen to them? Because the only Malazan fans I know are online." And then someone posted, "What do you mean? There are literally dozens of us. Why wouldn't you?" Anyway,
Fiddler would be a good name.
Fiddler,
Yeah.
yes, and
Big
a
dog.
little violin in its hand. And
Honestly, I feel like a lot of the Malazan marine names
Yeah,
work
I was about to say the marine
for
names.
dogs.
Okay. I think if Fiddler's a bit, I don't know, it feels a bit naughty. I don't know. Maybe I'm too used to like online people saying things, but
Quick Ben and now Fiddler. No.
You ruined it.
I
Dan, you ruined it.
Making
I don't
everything
know.
dirty over here, Dan.
It's just what I've seen.
Change your
being
name to Dirty
used.
Dan over there.
Now Stephen Erikson is never going to come on our podcast, Dan,
No,
because of you.
please come. I promise to behave.
Do we want to move on to Kalam and
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
all that?
The apt. I forgot that there was a Kalam chapter.
Oh, true.
I did too.
I am back invested in his storyline. I really
Oh,
enjoyed
yeah.
this part, particularly with the family of the Marines, and what's his name, who's the like damaged, like concussed captain, Kenneb.
Yeah.
That was a name that I remembered. But the fun thing about that is, like, I'll recognize these names and I don't remember at all what happened to these characters or how long. Like, they could be in one book, they could be in like 6 of the books. I don't remember. And so I'm like, Kenneb, that's a name I remember, and I couldn't tell you shit about him, but I'm now invested in him and his family, and Manala, who is his sister-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I had forgotten about them too until I reread it.
Also apt, adorable.
Yeah.
Love that little bloodthirsty demon. I want one for Christmas.
Did okay, noted. Look, keep an eye out for 3-legged dogs that look dangerous. But what was I gonna say? Manala, did she seem like she knew that had she seen the demon? Because she saw that something had ripped it up, and she's like, "Oh, you know what? Let's make up the story together about a bear. That sounds like a good story, right? They'll believe us, right?" And so it felt like she was in on the fact that Apt was what killed those 2 horses and the 2 men.
I feel like she didn't know, but she sort of trusted Kalam when Kalam was like trying to, like, oh, I don't know exactly. She's like, okay, I guess I'll trust you.
Okay,
I
makes
guess you
sense.
know what you're saying, but
Yeah. Like other people will probably be afraid, so let's make up the story. But me, I trust you. Yeah. Is it
maybe.
the other thing that I realized is Apt is a creature of shadow, right?
Mhm.
And Fiddler is also in a tower of shadow and like is getting some guidance from a priest of shadow. So are these 2 being in some way manipulated still or guided by shadow in some form? Fiddler definitely is, like, he's explicitly getting instructions from that guy, but but Kalam with Apt,
Possibly.
Maybe.
I don't think we know exactly, what all, what all the Apt is up to. I mean, the what was their name? The whirlwind. Anyway, she claimed that they had taken it to their will, but we don't know that. And in fact, at this point, I'd say no. It's probably operating on its own.
yeah.
I certainly think it's noteworthy that Kalam is going to kill the person that Shadowthrum maybe once killed the most in the world. Certainly top 5.
Yeah.
All right, chapter 10, or do we have any
think
other
so.
comments?
This was mostly just Kalam, right? And
Yeah.
the raid on those people and finding what's left of the part of the army that took refugees from that town. I forget the name. But yeah.
I don't remember.
And I guess he's sort of falling for Manala at this point. Oh, I guess there's more Felicin stuff, but I think we already talked about it. This is the chapter where the Talanamas show up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Chapter 10. Let's do it. What I've been waiting for all evening.
I think this was like the thing that I remember most from this book.
Oh yeah, this
Like this
particular
battle. Yeah.
section. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is one of the iconic scenes. The Talanda for me is like the iconic scene from this book, and one of the iconic scenes from the series as a whole. Like I'm with Varsha, I think you mentioned that, but the river crossing is definitely up there.
Yeah.
Actually, there's one other scene that's really iconic, but that's at the very end of the book.
Oh, true.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been waiting to get back to Coltain. Like, seems like this whole book, it feels like come on, let's get back to Coltain. Because I'll preface all this by saying, I almost DNF'd this series in the middle of this book because I kind of was different from most people. Like, I liked Gardens of the Moon. I was like, it wasn't amazing, but it was good. It was solid. I liked it. And like in the middle of this book, I was just so bored and like, I don't know, like the Chain of Dogs stuff really just wasn't working for me. And I was about to quit the book, and I was like, well, let me get the audiobook. Maybe that'll reinvest me. And it did. It kind of kept that forward momentum. Even when I wasn't engaged with it, it just kind of kept me moving forward. But now it's like, might be my favorite part of this book. Like when I got to chapter 10, I was like, this is amazing. Like, why did this not work for me the first time? I have no clue. But this was my favorite chapter so far.
Yeah, I bounced so hard off the military stuff in Deadhouse Gates on my first read through, but I am eating it up this time through. Everything that would do occur, I am loving.
Same. I remember, I think the last time too, I really appreciated this chapter. Like I said, like the images are firm in my mind. So I think the cleverness of it, the thing with the wagons and the laying of the stones, etc., all of that was really cool. The thing they did with the Semk god in the end, and the waking up of the spirits. That I didn't remember, but that bit I again ate up this time, like you said, Carl. But so it stayed with me, this chapter, but I really think I remember sort of trudging through it, if that makes sense, because like I dislike action scenes, I dislike battle scenes, whatever. But Dwecker is a really excellent person to see all of this through, and there were just so many thoughtful and philosophical moments through all of this. And there was one thing in particular that stood out. We see a lot more of the reincarnated warlocks than just Sormoinath, and that somehow hits different than just seeing one kid. And how Dwecker thinks of the one that's with him, is it Nether, as a child, right?
Nether's the girl.
Nether's the girl. She comes to him to create the path at some point, I think, to go stand on the wall, where he also meets Nil, I think. Anyway, one of them, I think it's Nether who goes to, or one of them goes to fight.
The first one he meets is Nether, because I remember the part where he's like, this is like an 8-year-old girl, and he has to like remind himself it's like an adult.
Exactly.
Inside, and saying these words.
She's off to fight that whole army and their mages, I guess. When she sees him, like she's like, yeah, I know, I'm headed there to take that battle. And he thinks to himself that this is a child he finds it hard to think of them as the really, really ancient reincarnated warlocks. They are children to him first, which is interesting. Like I do wonder about of course, there is the backstory that they died, and now this is how old they are, so they can't get any older warlocks. But the narrative choice to have these warlocks be children and therefore make us feel the impact of the war and this, I guess, chase through them, I think it's really interesting. Like that bit hit hard when he's like, oh, there's a child that's going out against that whole army, and then 2 of them died, which sucks again. Like they're probably going to reincarnate, but it sucks that they died still. And the fact that they were children.
That's a great point, that it is kind of you can definitely read it as a symbol for, or like a metaphor for, the way that war ages children prematurely. Right? That children have to act like adults. And because it's fantasy, in this case, they're literally adults reincarnated in a children's body. And not just any adults, but like you said, ancient adults. The most extreme, you can imagine. It is just intrinsically compelling.
Yeah. And the fact that they have to grow up too soon, that's an excellent point, because Dwecker sees Sormoinath looking more and more like the old man that he is, like with the gestures and the mannerisms in front of his eyes. Like during the council meeting, the war council, they go, Dwecker notices that about him.
We also get the shithead nobles introduced to them, causing problems.
So annoying. Or one of them is very annoying.
Well, 3 of them.
Nefara was awful. The other one was, I can't remember his name, I don't see it right here, but I liked it that one of the nobles actually isn't that bad. Like, later on he seems to genuinely care about his people, and then here in this war council, he's kind of like asking questions that are like, they don't want to answer because this is going to give away their strategy. But he's noticed, he's smart. He's noticing, like, and it's, I think it's coming from a place of concern, because he's like, well, last week you only had this many injuries, and now this week you have this many, and it's like, it's kind of like from his viewpoint, it's like, did we just lose half the army? Are they all wounded now? Like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, no, we're just, building up the sides. It's like, okay, but if that's true, then why is it sinking deeper? It's just because he's smart, I guess. I like that scene.
Yeah, I agree. This and I thought. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I was gonna say I really liked the red blades. Not the. I mean that we see it's Baria and Mesker, the 2 brothers that we'd met in the beginning of the book, as just real assholes. Like, we really didn't like them. They were about to get into it with the Wiccans, and then here Duiker warns them about these people coming in, and one of the brothers is still terrible, but the other one, you can tell, like, he has like a ghost of a smile on his face, like he probably believes Duiker, like, he's like, okay, it's like, well, we'll keep that under consideration, and then in the end, we find out that they did hold their ground and stop those people, and I don't know, did they die, like the two brothers? I couldn't quite tell.
I think so.
I
Yeah.
think they did, but I'm not sure.
I think
Like, a whole
almost
bunch
all
of
the
Red
Red
Blades
Blade
died
died,
anyway.
right?
Huh?
Didn't most of
Well,
the
there
Red
were
Blades die?
Yeah, I think most of the Red Blades died. The only ones we saw were the ones that were defending the guy that was dying, which I loved that. Duiker's like, oh, you were here, defending your standard, and they were like, no, we don't care about that. Like, our brother was dying, and we didn't want them to get a hold of him, so we fought off the bad guy so he could die an honorable death rather than be drug off by them.
Yeah, I love when he says, "Is that the story you wanted in the Annals of History?" And it's like, yeah, that's exactly how we want it told. Yeah, that a lot of brilliant scenes in this one, and the thing with the nobles, the fuddy-duddy nobles wanting to live their hunky-dory lives is like just one of the highlights, and I love how Coltain sort of treats them and tells them off. Listens to their concerns, but also is like, nope, not having that. By the wagons go first, then the cattle. Can you please separate the two? Nope, not happening. And the guy whose name starts with a T, I forget. His questioning was interesting because I almost feel like that bit was a great way to tell the readers that something is off with the wagon, so it's not so we can try to guess what's happening, like that with the mystery, the build up with Duiker noticing that the cattle are moving much faster than they should, and the people crossing much faster than they should, and then finally when his own horse is crossing the stream, and he's like, that's what happened. So I thought the build up there was really great, starting with the questioning of the noble. So yeah, that all came together really well, and I appreciated it a lot more this time around. And the bit with the spirits was pretty badass. The dead spirits.
Which,
God,
well,
yeah,
and
the
I
spirits
wanted to
of
bring
the
up the
earth.
spirits too. I thought it was really interesting what they're doing here, because it's like Sormo, brings back these spirits, and they're fighting the army of the whirlwind goddess, but the spirits of the wind are actually fighting against these people because they forgot them, and they're like angry, and it's I don't know. I did this chapter is a lot more pro Malazan, I think, than I remember, because like they're really hammering that like these the warlocks, I think Nether and Nil are talking to him. They're like, oh yeah, the Wiccans were just like this too, and killing each other over little squabbles, and then Kellenved came and shamed us and united us, and so it's really kind of like driving this idea of I don't know, this imperialism here is good for them, because otherwise they're just massacring each other. So it's bringing order to the chaos, I guess, is probably their...
Yeah, it's one of the things that I like most about this series is that there's always more nuance to explore. There's always a different point of view. The Malazan Empire isn't just like pure good or pure evil. Like, they do horrible, atrocious things. Like, they commit like real atrocities, but at the same time, they also improve the quality of life for a lot of the citizens under their yoke, and they do help solve old disputes, and they defeat. Well, I'm gonna stop talking before we get too far along, but the point being that like they're it's complex, and the power of empire, what empire does is complex. I mean, you look at the Malazan Empire, I think is most notably influenced by the Roman Empire, despite clearly taking place in like technologically a much later age. And that's true with Rome, where Rome did a lot of really horrible shit and certainly didn't like solve all of the problems within its borders, but it also did create roads that made travel and trade much easier, and aqueducts in a lot of cities that helped improve the water quality, and any number of things that just improve the lives for everyday people. And that doesn't excuse the atrocities either. It's you can kind of, I think, hold two competing ideas at the same time, and that this is definitely an interesting exploration of that. In the same way, like in book 1, right, that we follow the bridge burners who are like preparing to commit an act of terrorism.
Oh yeah.
And at the same time, like they kind of save the day in the end, you know, like that's what we're reading. Like it's complex, you know, it's not a black and white kind of good and bad situation. It's people do good and bad things.
I just wonder if the people would be able to see these things in this opinion, like the Wiccans, within, you know, this short time span. I can see it maybe, you know, within like a couple of generations or something, with like, oh, you know, thinking back about it. I don't know if the people living through it would also agree, but, you know, maybe.
Well, I think it's possible that the ones who disagree, we're just not seeing their point of view. And we're just seeing the ones who are like, yeah, like we've all killed each other beforehand. And now we don't do that. And like, that's nice, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important also to see who we're hearing that from. I mean, she's this warlock that we don't know how old. So she comes, you know, she's seen this for a long time.
True.
Now there's order, but also there's order. Like, it's also taking, you know, it's not taking into account what's going to happen down the line, you know, because we could, you know, just because it's good now doesn't mean it always will.
Yeah, I think the one of the dangers, certainly, of imperialism that Sormo, or is it Nether? Which one of them is it that is talking? Nether?
Nether?
That has this
it's either Nether or Nil. I don't remember which one.
Okay. Yeah, I mix those two up all the time. But you know, the way that empires can kind of subsume cultures and homogenize in some ways. And while the Malazan Empire, I think we find out, does try to let people kind of have their religious beliefs and kind of do their thing, it's still kind of inevitable that the culture will naturally impact and dominate. And that's something that, you know, Nether doesn't really touch on there. It's an interesting conundrum. And I'm with you, Shannon, that it's a cool bit there amidst it all.
But one thing I could use, I do wish we would see a little bit more positive on the rebel side. Like, 'cause I feel like so far we haven't any. Like, they're all rapists and killers and terrible. Like, we haven't seen anybody noble on that side yet. So hopefully we will.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, that is an interesting point. Like, they've just been sort of awful so far. And not people that we have a lot of respect for, except for that one bit about, well, how they kept feeding Duiker, this man who sort of, that was another cool thing about him as he's making his way across, I don't think it's the desert, right? But somewhere.
3 months, by the way.
For 3 months,
I didn't notice that.
That's
3
crazy.
months he
Really?
was
I didn't.
traveling it.
Yeah.
And these people were feeding him,
Yeah, and
he's
they've
like
been
a spy.
Yeah. They don't know he's a spy. But yeah, that's so cool that like they're just feeding a random traveler on the road. But and he sort of become a symbol of the apocalypse, even though he is of the opposite side. But it's interesting that they see him as the symbol of apocalypse, because towards the end, the end of this chapter, when they are done with the ritual where they kill that god, and he's got blood all over him, and he's walking, and people are like sort of making signs against evil when they see him, and he's like, am I a harbinger of doom? So he's seeing signs everywhere, and now he's himself a walking sign of sorts, which harks back to how the people of the apocalypse were seeing him as a sign. So it's interesting, again, like Duiker as the person we see all of this through, and he's sort of giving us the signs and symbols to look out for through the telling of this story.
That's an interesting point of treating the, you know, they don't do this knowingly, but treating the historian as this harbinger of what's to come, which is, again, a very potent metaphor.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. The historian part of it. Yeah, that's a brilliant point. Yeah. And there is some discussion here about those who ignore history and those who follow it. I forget if it was in this chapter or this chapter or the
It
earlier
was.
chapters. But yeah.
Those who most could use history don't read it. Is
Right,
what,
yeah,
he tells
exactly.
Polk, I think, or Coltain.
Yeah, because Colton's like, you're putting me to sleep. Why don't you go to sleep instead? Yeah, it's. I think mostly what I want to discuss from this chapter is in the form of quotes. I underlined a lot in this section.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't have anything else if we want to move on to quotes.
Yeah, shall we? Or does
Dan,
anybody
Shannon,
have
anything else?
high-level topics to
I
discuss?
don't,
I
don't
think
think
I
so.
did. I like that you'd mentioned Duiker covered in blood and stuff at the end. Yeah, that was really evocative. Like, yeah. It says like the historian, the three warlocks walk out and they're covered with old blood and fragments of flesh, and I'm like, what? No, I mean, what? Like,
Yeah.
was it splattering all over them? Like, good gracious! Like, it just really
Yeah.
drove home how horrific like them eating that Semp god was. Like, those spirits are messy eaters, I guess, because it was just flinging everywhere.
That's
Oof.
making me think of an episode from Fringe. But sorry, Dan, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. So that made me think of something else, Shannon, how you put that. So Semk is a really ancient god, right? And we've been talking before about the layering of civilizations and sort of the revenge of old civilizations, which is one of the ways in which the apocalypse is manifesting, I guess. And so again, like this harbinger of doom covered in the blood of a very ancient god, I think sort of adds to that imagery, which is quite fantastic. Yeah.
Cool.
And then I also like the undead army that Sormo hauled up. And then I like how they did, like, you know, like in Lord of the Rings, that was like the trump card. Like the undead army comes in and boom, they just wipe. You know, they win because they're undead. But like these guys, I mean, they're dead bodies with like old rusty stuff. Like no, they, I mean, yeah, they take out some bad guys, I'm sure, but they go down pretty quick because they're desiccated corpses.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, I
mean,
thought
the
that
Flying
was
Masts are also desiccated corpses, but they're pretty strong.
Yeah, but they're a lot more magical. Like
I guess.
I feel like they've got a lot more going for them than these guys did.
And they've been undead a long time, so they have practice.
I'm almost imagining, like, I know this is not what they look like, you know, because these are like corpses, but, you know, it's the spirit of the earth, like, rising up. And I'm almost kind of imagining, like, Studio Ghibli, like, little nature spirits, like, charging into battle and, like, you know, in their little voices, like, let's go kill everyone!
That would be pretty funny.
That's hilarious. But on the subject of that undead army, Duiker and one of the warlocks, I think it was Nil, have this conversation about, I think Duiker is feeling sorry for them for having to relive the horrors that happened to them. And the warlock is telling him, you know, if they had been the winners, they would have done the exact same thing to the... And I guess that was a conversation that led to... Duiker being informed that Kellenred brought the Wiccans together because they used to fight like this before. But there is some discussion there about how people are always like this, and Duiker's trying to find some optimism that you still find some good in it. And the warlock, who has been through this over and over again through all their past lives, supposedly, is saying, no, this is how we are. There's very little hope for us, which it was a bit of a bleak conversation, but can't say I disagree.
Yeah, one of the things
I like
definitely
that they
think
were
about-
apparently fighting.
I'm sorry. No. I just very quickly, one of the things I definitely think about reading this series is, you know, kind of the old maxim of, you know, those who don't remember history are doomed to repeat it. And it's like, it's one of those things that you always hope, like, or you feel like, oh no, this generation or the next generation or 100 years from now, like, we're finally going to break that cycle. But it's like we as human beings keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And it just keeps happening.
Yeah. And on that subject...
I like that these...
Sorry, go ahead, Shannon.
These people from long ago were fighting over, they said, the antlered throne. And I was like, I read that, and I was like, is this like some kind of veiled reference to like Game of Thrones or something? The Iron Throne, or Tad Williams and the Dragonbone chair? I don't know. But I was just like, yeah, just the antlered throne. I was like, doesn't sound that impressive.
And they were fighting over that, right? Like two contenders for the antler throne, which stated in that
There was one
way.
tribe that split.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
And they were fighting over this throne. Because, it was like, they said it was like cousins and nephews. That's who they were fighting, like their own family.
And stated in that way, it sounds like a ridiculous thing they are fighting for. Like a toy. Kids fighting over a toy. And they're causing all this havoc because of it. But, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
this little antler throne in the middle of nowhere that doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah. And then, yeah, exactly. That too. And there's the illusion of control, the bit about the illusion of control. When List says, if we are lucky, they'll wait too long and give us room to fall back. And Duiker says, that's the kind of risk Hood loves. And anyway, he eventually goes on to ask, do I see control on all sides or the illusion of control? Sometimes the two are one and the same. In terms of their effect, I mean, the only difference, or so Coltain says, is that when you bloody the real thing, it absorbs the damage while the other shatters. Which I thought was pretty cool. That
was a good quote.
Yeah.
And there was one more. Go ahead.
I love the epigraph for chapter 10. It is one thing to lead by example with 6 soldiers at your back. It is wholly another with 10,000.
Yes. And that's about Dasim Ultor.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Which
may do occur, in fact.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. When Bult says that he wished he had seen the road go up, and Duiker says victory tastes sweetest in the absence of haunting memories, Bult, savor it.
Yeah, because it's great, it's amazing, it saved them, but, literally several thousand people just died.
Yeah. And Duiker witnessed that. The bit about the mourning afterwards, two things. One, Nether tells Duiker that Coltain has them to mourn, the Wiccans. But Duiker has these observations about the ritual of grief. Duiker had seen many people as imperial historian, yet among them not one in his recollection did not possess a ritual of grief. For all our personal gods, Hood alone embraces us all in 1,000 guises. When the breath from his gates brushes close, we ever give voice to drive back that eternal silence. Tonight we hear the Semk and the Tisandí, uncluttered rituals. Who needs temples and priests to chain and guide the expression of loss and dismay when all is sacred? I loved that.
Very good one.
Yeah. And there was, I'm turning in the wrong direction. There was one more during the ritual with the ice. Sormo's words held a timbre of antiquity, the remorseless cold of ages folding over one another again and again until it seemed to Duiker that every rock, every cliff, every mountain moved in eternal motion like mindless leviathans. I think I'm starting to understand why the images stuck with me, because they're so evocative.
Yeah.
The Wiccans raised a wail that ran through each clan's encampment, the sound as much sorrowful as triumphant, a fitting dirge to announce the fall of a god. There was a fun one about Malazan engineers that I think was the epigraph to chapter 9.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
The
one about them being cantankerous and not liking authority, and
Yeah.
They're the heartstone of the Malazan army.
So good.
And they showed. I like how when they run into the engineers/sappers, they're like, go fight someone or something. Get out of my way. We have something to unplug.
I think we should also mention we still haven't seen the captain of the engineers, the sappers. He's a no-show. He refuses to show up to meetings. So
that's right.
Yeah.
He does his own
so we'll
thing.
have to keep an eye out for him at some point. Maybe we'll finally see him.
And I think, was it Bolt saying later that all the sappers were sitting and crying like all of them had lost their mothers, and it was because they'd
because
used
the cussers were
Mm.
gone.
the last of the cusses. I mean, we see them.
Though that
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, though that is really sad. I mean, they because the cussers, we know from reading these books, are the most dangerous of the munitions they have, and they used them all. And
Yeah.
we're now planning a run to Erin, so we have a very long journey, and we just lost our theoretically most powerful weapon. So
That's true. Yeah. They celebrate for like 2 seconds, and then they're like, "Oh, all the cusses are gone. Now we have to do all the digging by hand." That's why we leave them. The next thing we find out is that they're all sitting and crying like baby.
Yep.
That's quite hilarious. I love these like little breaks that we got.
It's a great introduction to the sappers. Yeah.
There was one thing that Pust says that was interesting about Icarium to Mapo. I'm trying to find the quote.
Very quickly, too, I remembered, we didn't talk about this at all. On the Salanda, the Talanamas initially believe the people aboard the Salanda served the chained one.
Yes.
So that's something to keep your eyes out for. Needless to say, I know what they're talking about, so I'm not going to comment.
Who's the chained one? Yeah, tell me, please.
You'll have to find out.
I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows? You're taking all the fun out of it, Dan. When
Okay.
you said who knows, we kept quiet and moved on.
But I know who knows. I know who doesn't know. You know.
I think you know, Dan.
No, I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know. I haven't read enough.
Okay.
You kind of have, but maybe you've forgotten. You read as
Oh
far
yeah, I'm sure I have.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I forgot.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you said you read like 4 books or something, so you met him.
Yeah, but I don't know the whole story about it.
Yeah.
Very vaguely.
Yeah, that was interesting. There were a bunch of other things that they talked about, which, and during the ice ceremony, some of the stuff that Sormo Inat says that he is seeing happening, I guess I'll ask questions on the spoiler thread, but I want to know if it's about some other stuff that happens in later books or if it's referencing things that I don't know about yet because maybe they happen in Esselmont's books. But
yeah, ask in the spoiler thread at Page Chewing Forums.
yes.
Little plug.
Little plug. Come check us out there and talk to us about the books. Yeah. There was this interesting thing that Pust says about Icarium. It's a matter of justice. Your tempered companion kneels before that altar, does he not? So apparently Icarium cares about justice in some form. But yeah, I think that's mostly what I had. There was one other funny thing maybe that I don't remember, but any other quotes? I kind of hogged the quote section, but this chapter was excellent.
What's your section, the quote section?
The quote section. Yeah. Cool. If that is all, then next week I think we're going to read the next 2 chapters. That puts us at I think almost exactly 100 pages in the mass market paperback. So chapters 11 and 12 of the section entitled Chain of Dogs. Yeah, we'll see everybody next week. Thank you so much for listening.